Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of All Things Crime. I am super excited this morning. I have a guest on named Colleen Fitzpatrick, and she is a Ph.D. She has more accolades. In fact, I've written them all down, and I'm going to have to read them here. But yeah, roll your eyes, Colleen, because you know what? It is what it is, and we are going to go through this. So this may be a little painful for you, but first off, welcome, Colleen, to the program. Yeah,
well, hi, yeah, nice to meet everybody. Hi out there in podcast land.
Yeah, and video land. So whether you're listening to this on the podcast or watching it on YouTube or Rumble, we appreciate you, and hopefully you'll hit that subscribe button and the bell, and so you never miss an episode. But our guest today is essentially, you know, we've heard a lot in recent years about genealogical forensics genealogy, if I can get that right. So, and Colleen is basically one of the founders of this. And so her experience in the forensics and helping solve cold cases, and especially homicides, is just absolutely unparalleled. And so I was doing some research on you, Colleen. And, well, first of all, two of the, don't do that, right? Two of the most respected homicide detectives that I know recommended that we talk, and so they were like, you know, if you know anything about DNA and genealogy and, you know, those areas in helping solve cases, you have to talk to Colleen Fitzpatrick. So, yeah, both Lindsey Wade and Joe Kennedy, who I know you know very well.
Yeah, nice people.
Fantastic people. And both extremely experienced homicide detectives. So you come very highly recommended, Colleen.
Thank you. I like those people.
So I had to list some of this stuff, and I'm just going to read this so that I don't miss anything. So first of all, the founder of Identifinders International.
Identifinders, stop. Everybody mispronounces it. Sorry. Identifinders.
Identifinders. I'm sorry. What did I say?
Identifiers.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. All right.
I'm sorry. Now you see, I just ruined the whole podcast.
No. Oh, you know what? When my wife never hesitates to correct me, so everyone else may as well. There you go.
Okay, there you go. You've been well trained.
All right. Yes. Let's start over. Okay. Founder of Identifinders International. Did I get that right? Okay.
Yes.
Widely recognized as the founder of modern forensics genealogy, worked several hundred cold case homicides, member of, and I always mispronounce this too, so member of the VDOC Society.
Yeah, VDOC, yes.
VDOC. Yeah, I knew I mispronounced that one too. VDOC Society. And, you know, maybe you can explain a little bit about what that does as we go along. The Phoenix Canal Murders, you were instrumental in helping solve that. And, I think that one would be really interesting to get into. Co-founder of the DNA DOE project. Wrote, you're quite the author too. Wrote Forensics Genealogy, DNA and Genealogy, The Dead Horse Investigation, Forensics Photo Analysis for Everyone, and The DNA Detective. Are there any other books that I forgot?
No, I'm working on another one, but it's not out. And I'm eternally working on the next book. One day there'll be another one on the list.
Well, I'll tell you, I started a book about 3 times, and I think I got about 2 pages of the first chapter written, and that's about the extent of it. So the fact that you've got 4 books already and you're working on another one is impressive, to say the least. You're a Ph.D. in nuclear physics and have an MS and a BA in physics. You're fluent in English, French, German, and Spanish.
Well, yeah, okay, near fluent. In English, no, near fluent. I do very well. I do very well. Let's put it that way.
Wow. Okay. Well, many years ago, I spoke almost fluent Japanese, and so the fact that you know
Oh wow! You
four
kidding?
languages is unreal.
Really the language that I tell you, Japanese is the one language that I just couldn't make progress in. You know, I walked in the class knowing the same stuff I walked out of the class knowing. It was so tough.
Yeah, it's a different language for sure. The
Yeah,
just the structure of it is so much different than like Spanish
yeah,
and English. That
yeah.
yeah,
It's so weird.
the verb is
It's
always
so
at the
weird.
end, and yeah, it's
We could be the whole podcast could be about learning Japanese.
right.
Believe me.
Well, I'm pretty sure all my listeners aren't really interested in learning that. So
No, no. Let's move on. Let's move
yeah,
on.
absolutely. So let's get started with if you could just give like a quick introduction of yourself and especially how you. I mean, your resume speaks for itself, but how did you get into forensics genealogy?
People ask me that all the time, and well, the timeline is that, of course, I have a hard science background, and I, love genealogy. I never really got interested in genealogy. It's funny, I was kind of born into it because I'm from New Orleans. I grew up, around all four grandparents. Sometimes they're brothers, sisters, sometimes they're aunts and uncles. So I say I grew up around living history. So you never are apart from that. It is you. It is part of you. So having that flavor or that background historically and personally and having a hard science background, sooner or later, they were going to come together in the same brain and come out to be forensic genealogy. So that's basically what happened. I pursued science. And in 2005, I had my own company, and it was not a good era for small companies. So we closed, and that was about the time I finished my first book. And I thought forensic genealogy, and I thought, okay, we'll do this for a little while, and let's open another rocket science company somewhere. And it didn't work that way. And now I do forensics.
Well, I'm sure every law enforcement agency that you've ever helped is very glad that you didn't, start another, rocket science type of a company because, yeah, who would have ever thought, especially back in, the early 2000s, that forensics genealogy would capture the, Golden State Killer and all the others. So,
Yeah. Yeah, right. It's amazing. And I want to say, too, people ask me what the connection is. How did you go? And I do want to comment that the connection is that as a scientist, in a lab, I handled an immense amount of data analysis. What's good, what's bad, what am I looking for? Is it there? Do I have to get noise out of it? That kind of thing. That's exactly what I do with genealogy. It's just all about data. It's all about finding that data that's good, getting rid of the data that's not useful, and knowing what to do with it. It really doesn't matter what field you're in. That is generically what it's all about.
oh, absolutely. Well, maybe really quickly tie in how genealogy and DNA, for that matter, ties in with physics.
Again, it's data. It's knowing how to, looking at, there's all kind of things you look at in data, like what data is not useful, what data looks useful. It's called false positives, but it's not really. And that would be, you can see in data, you're taking data on a screen and you have peaks and stuff. And there's noise in there and you have to get rid of it. Well, it's the same way in genealogy. Like if you had two guys in your tree with the same name, or you're looking for somebody named John Smith from New York, there's 50 million. Which one is the right one? Same way in physics. Which one is the right one? What are you looking for? It's the same thing. And like in physics, you take data, you have some detector, you have some screen with peaks you're looking at, and actually about 95% of what you're looking at is not useful. You don't care. You're looking for that sweet spot. And in genealogy, you build trees. Suppose you are a match to somebody, a violent offender. I am another genealogical match. In other words, we're both DNA cousins to this guy. We don't know really the connection. I have a family tree, going back forever. You have a family tree. We're only going to connect in one place as a rule. So, 99% of what I have in this glorious tree, throw it out. I'm looking for my connection with you and the killer. Throw out all your stuff. Throw out all mine except for that connection. And that's what you're doing. You're filtering. You're looking at, and just in physics, we have electronic filters to get rid of noise. We have tricks, to get rid of more noise, to make that sweet spot bigger. It's called signal to noise ratio in physics. Same thing here. We have GEDmatch has plenty of tools. They have in common with, they have their mixture, they have name search. You have Ancestry with all that information. There are filters you use in genealogy to get rid of that big tree I have and to get rid of that tree you have and find the sweet spot.
Oh, yeah, it's so fascinating. So just kind of to differentiate between like the typical DNA that everybody hears about, that like CODIS related STR type of a DNA profile versus the genealogical profile. Can you briefly explain the two of those so that the listeners...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I give a lot of training sessions, and this is part of it. CODIS, the legal form of identification, was invented 30 years ago. And those markers are called STRs. And the important thing is the S stands for short. So what that means, short, tandem, repeat, the S is for short. It means that marker is short and long and short and long. It's a piece of real estate on the genome. And at that time, they picked 20 of those pieces of real estate, all in the different chromosomes. And they used that. And those markers, those little pieces, were easy to reproduce. They were reliable. They gave enough diversity in the population. They were devoid of medical information. And basically, they said, we'll use it as a one-to-one. So we have DNA from the crime scene. Used to be 13 markers, now it's 20. We'll get our STRs from the crime scene, and we'll compare that to something in a database to see if the guy already committed another crime, and we know who he is. So it's basically one-to-one. And nowadays you can do like 1 to almost 1. You can do a little bit of and that's only 12 states allow familial matching, it's called. But even so, it's only good for mom and dad and child. It doesn't reach further than that. You can't take a first cousin and find somebody in the data. You can't do that. So after 30 years, now we have genealogy. And the interesting part is all we're doing now it comes from the same stuff that Ancestry does, 23andMe does, and that came out of the biomedical industry. So it's a completely different path of development. So what we use in genealogy is called SNPs, and the S stands for single. It's single nucleotide polymorphism. So single means a single point. So instead of using 20 pieces of real estate, we use about 1 million points. And so now the game changes. How do I compare to what's in the database? One-to-one is going to be kind of weird, right? So now the game changes to how many points do we share? So if I put my own a violent offender in a database, I'm not looking for an exact match. He's not going to be in there. He's not going to have taken a genealogy test, DNA test, right? What I'm looking for is people that share points with him. So if I'm lucky enough to come up with my list of cousins, you put the DNA, your points, your 1 million points, you put that in a database, and you come up with a list of, we call them DNA cousins, people that share DNA with that guy. And if you're lucky to come up with somebody who shares 50% of their SNPs, their points, it has to be a parent, a child, a very close relative, and you find out who that person is, and you build their tree, and it's got to be a brother. If it's a brother or sister, there's only one way they're connected. If it's a first cousin, it could be 2 ways. They could be connected on mom's side. They could be connected on dad's side. If it's a second cousin, at 4 ways. You know, the more cousinship you have, the distant, the more ways it can be connected. So what happens is, I'm just talking about if I find one, right? But we have many, and so that requires some kind of Sudoku type thinking, where you move, you know, the first cousin, is he a second cousin, or do they relate to each other? And there's only one way that it all fits together. And we play Sudoku. It's like a genealogical Sudoku. And when we get that all set up, there's one piece missing, and that's Mr. X.
Wow. So when you say a 1-to-1 ratio, like what they use in the FBI database, the CODIS database, if it's not a 1-to-1 match, if it's maybe they say it's like 1 in 4,000 versus somebody that would authentically be a 1-to-1 match might be 1 in a trillion. So when you talk about those kind of ratios and what they actually talk about in court, for example, how would that differentiate when you're talking about the SNPs?
Okay, you're mixing a couple of things.
Okay.
First of all, when you have CODIS and those now 20 markers, you do look for the 1-to-1. So you have somebody in your database, and it's 1-to-1. So, you know, the agencies get together and figure out, you know, who this guy is. And then they say, okay, it's John Smith. You know, he committed a bank robbery or something. We know who he is. Okay, then when you go to court, you say, how likely is it that he matches, and there's not some random guy walking on the street that has the same 1-to-1? So then you go in, that's more like population statistics. How sure am I? And yes, I got my 1-to-1, but how sure am I that it's unique? How sure, if he's got a weird marker and he matches the weird marker in the database, the chances are higher that you're not going to get a random match. And that's what you hear in court, like 1 in trillion. Or if you have a combination of matches and it's really, you know, unique, that's when you get your 1 in 7 trillion or billion. But if it's kind of common, you know, 1 in 400, that might not be good in court. And that's another reason they went up to 20 markers, to get those statistics, you know, more and more. If we had 50 markers and you matched, it would be hard to, you know, say another random guy's going to have all 50 the same, right? So really, it's 20 is where we're at now, and that's probably where it's going to stay for a while. And I will tell you that what we do is, you know, we do some magic with genealogy, and we identify John Smith. Great. That's only used as an investigative lead. We have to go to the police and say, we think it's this guy. And they have to go and get a DNA sample from him, either with his permission or to collect his trash or something. And they have to do the legal part after we're done. All we do is generate a lead for right now, a lead to that identity. And then the police go and get, now when they, you know, get their, say, consensual sample and they match it to the crime scene, that's when they can go and arrest somebody. And when they arrest them, they take another DNA sample right there in front of the video cameras at the police station with the barcode, you know, put it through the system. And that's what's used in court.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you clarifying that. So why, for example, as of right now, why can't genealogical forensics be used in court?
Well, I would say it can, to illustrate a lead, you know, but it's not, it hasn't been, you know, validated in court. You know, for one thing, right now, there's no crime labs. You know, crime labs have to go through all kind of accreditation, validation with their equipment. You know, it's a process. I mean, it's hard, and there are no crime labs that do this. So really, this is coming out the biomedical industry. It's not that, you know, validated, credentialed, that there's a word for it, that you just can't walk in court and say, hey, my coffee cup matches his and therefore he's guilty. You have to have some system that has been put in place, that you go through the procedure and you safeguard that you really are looking at good evidence and talking, you know, there's some sanity behind this and some kind of organization. And genealogy hasn't gone through that yet. Now, I will say that Intermountain Forensics is becoming credentialed, is becoming accredited by ANAB. They're working on it now. So, and also I know that Verigen, who owns GEDmatch, is working on getting their, processing into the crime labs. So it's not far in the future that, genealogy is going to be more acceptable. It's just not right now.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.